Mandarin Chinese has a pretty fierce reputation. For one thing, they write like this. And did someone say tones? But since 100 million people are learning Mandarin, is it really that hard, or is it just one big misunderstanding?
Elephant. So a big elephant.
So first of all, do not expect an alphabet or letters, because Chinese, as you probably know, does not have them. It's all about symbols that are full of clues about their meaning. Think of the difference between 15 and 15. This 15 tells you how the number sounds, but this one only tells you what it means. Chinese writing is a bit like that. You don't get the letters, only the symbol. But without letters, how do you know how to say a word? Well, that is the mystery and magic and, frankly, the challenge of Mandarin Chinese. Ready for some fun? Chinese characters are called hanzi, and you write them with different strokes that form components. These components are your basic building blocks. If you stick two or more components together, you get a character. Take a look. You can write some components side by side, some one above the other, and even one inside the other. So quite nice, right? But they're not letters, they are syllables. So what do you get when you put two or more syllables together? You get a word. And here's the wonder about Chinese characters. The individual components are full of clues about what a character means and sounds like. Like radicals. Radicals are a kind of component that give you a clue about the word's category, the type of word, if you like. Now, there are 214 of these. For example, the radical for grass looks like this. That's right, just a picture. Now, you can see what happens if you combine grass with other components. Can you spot the grass radical in there? These characters mean tea, flower, lotus, vegetables, and medicine, respectively. All things to do with the earth and plants. Quite clever, right? Just like in English, a word can have just one syllable or a lot of syllables. Here's the word meaning aeroplane. See how it's made from two characters? The first one means fly and the second one means machine. Fly machine. Pretty cool, right? Or here is a fun one. If you repeat the component meaning hand 3 times, it creates a character that means pickpocket. 3 hands equals stealing, right? Pretty cool. Here are a few more similar character compounds. So that's the idea. Problem is that there are 50,000 or more of these characters, and they are definitely not all so obvious. Take a look at this character. Can you guess what it means? Well, it means verbose, obviously. But jokes aside, if you learn just 200 to 300 of the most common characters, you should already be able to understand quite a lot of what you read. And as you go along, you will start to see patterns showing up, and it's pretty exciting when you start to spot patterns. Then they mess with your head and tell you that each character can have multiple sounds and meanings. Charming. Imagine you spent 6 months learning Mandarin, you go to China and you start saying something that you've been learning in Mandarin with someone and they respond to you with, sorry, I don't speak English. Great stuff. So it's not just that you have to say the words in the right way, you also have to catch what people say back to you, like with any language, and that can be hard. It's a common complaint that Mandarin speakers connect their words too fast for beginners to be able to catch. Again, something that happens in every language, and they probably have that same complaint about us English speakers.
And most of them are scavengers that feed on insects, worms, and plant material in the rivers where they live.
Know what they call a piranha in Mandarin Chinese? Well, it is of course a food people fish. That's right. To a Chinese piranha, we are the same category as food. Chinese words don't always make a lot of sense if you translate them literally, but if you read a Chinese story about piranhas, well, you will never forget the word because you will see the word over and over in context, which is why at StoryLearning we teach Mandarin Chinese through stories. More about this in the description below. But before we move on, let me give you a few more example monsters for your dreams tonight. You may or may not want these to stick in the memory. But characters and words are just the start, really. Next, you've got to learn to connect them to make phrases and sentences. As a beginner, you're going to thank your lucky stars for one little thing.
鲨鱼, 鲨鱼.
See these words up at the top? Well, pinyin literally means spell sounds, and it's a way to write Chinese using the Roman alphabet. This is where every new student of Mandarin breathes a temporary sigh of relief, because the letters you know so well from the Latin alphabet can help you to train your mind and mouth. in the beginning so that you can get used to pronouncing Chinese, but only in the beginning, mind you, because as useful as pinyin is, and even Chinese people use it, it's only like training wheels on a bike. You don't want to rely on them for too long. And if you ever want to be literate in Chinese, well, you're going to have to learn to read and write characters. There are no two ways about it. But wait just 1 minute. What on earth do these little marks mean?
Ma versus ma. Your throat's doing different things. That is the tone.
The rumour is true. Even if you pronounce the word correctly, if you use the wrong tone, the meaning of the whole word or sentence will change. But what are tones exactly? Well, think of singing a song. The pitch of your voice can go up or down, rise or fall, or stay flat.
波博果过
There are 4 main tones in Mandarin Chinese and 1 neutral, which means you can pronounce the same syllable in 5 different ways. Look at all the meanings one word can have depending on what your voice does as you say it. Which reminds me, what are those marks above the pinyin? Well, you might have already guessed, they are the tone markers. Notice how each one is above a vowel. That's because they tell you which tone that vowel is pronounced with. It's a very handy shortcut to understanding what tone goes with a word. So, in case this wasn't obvious, tones in Chinese are really important. Leaving out the tone is like leaving out the vowel in an English word. You just won't make any sense. And in case this sounds like Captain Obvious talking here, I do regularly meet a certain kind of Westerner learning Chinese who says, yeah, man, I'm not going to bother with tones. I don't need to be perfect. I just want to communicate without them, you know? And this just fundamentally misunderstands the fact that tones are not an optional extra. They are not an add-on. They are the word, and that word is not the word without the tone. So don't be that guy. Take the tone seriously. And one way to learn tones seriously is to learn with stories. How is that? Because stories that come with audio not only help you learn the language naturally through the story, but they also help your ear to get used to the sounds of the word at the same time. Because guess what? In order to be able to say a word with the correct tone, you've got to be able to hear it first, and that's why learning with stories is so powerful. Hear it first, produce it second. It's also super fun and very different from the more traditional ways of learning Mandarin. And if you'd like to learn more about how to learn a language like Mandarin Chinese with stories, or story learning as I call it, then you should download my story learning kit. It's completely free. There's a link in the description. It has a massive collection of masterclasses, audio guides, printable worksheets, and it will show you step by step how story learning works so you can decide if this method is right for you or not. It's completely free. Link in the description. For so many languages, grammar is the biggest monster of them all. But Mandarin Chinese grammar isn't really that hard at all. Wait till you see these little beauties. Mandarin Chinese has just one way to write a sentence. Time, subject, verb, object, particle. For example, I wash my face, or I like eating apricots. You always put Chinese words in the same order. But notice anything missing? Well, apricot is apricot whether there's only one or a whole bowl of them, and that's because Chinese doesn't have plurals. You also don't have to change the verb. See that? Eat, eating, well, it's all the same in Mandarin. Here's another one. The verb to go is the same for every subject, both in the way you speak it and the way you write it. No mean conjugation tricks whatsoever. You're gonna love this. Mandarin Chinese only uses one tense, the present tense, and all you have to do is make sure that you state the time period at the beginning of the sentence, which then changes the time that you are talking about, like this. Now, see what happens when I write the same sentence, only changing the beginning. The verb stays exactly the same. You do have to sometimes add a little completion particle, like this little guy here, but more on that in just a second. At least you do not have to learn hundreds or even thousands of complex conjugation rules like you do in most European languages. And if you have any Chinese friends who speak English, you might recognize this lack of verb conjugation in the way that they speak English, because to the Chinese mind, verb conjugation and verb tenses, well, it's not something that's necessary in order to get your meaning across. So when speaking English, they often struggle to remember to do it. If your tone changes the meaning of every word, then how in the world do Chinese people ask questions? Well, it's easy. They have a tiny magical word that looks like this. It's called a particle. On its own, it means nothing, but at the end of the sentence, it turns a statement into a question. You can use it for all yes or no questions. Very, very handy. There are other particles that have other functions, like to change the mood of a sentence, disappointment, surprise, whatever you happen to be feeling, but they always have a neutral tone and they never change. So you can just learn the particles off by heart.
我有4条鱼
I have 4 fish.
There are tons of measure words in Chinese. A measure word is like a pair of jeans, where pair is the measure word. We only do this with a few things in English, but Chinese has a measure word for pretty much everything.
The measure word 头 is mainly applied to large animals, such as an elephant, a cow, or a pig.
The good thing is that they live in groups of the same type of thing. So for example, all paper things have the same measure word. This one means piece. You use it for flat objects like paper, newspaper, stamps, photos, paintings, etc. But it gets quite funny because even bed uses the same measure word. Why? Well, a bed has a flat surface like paper. The good news is that there is a genetic counter measure word, 个, that you can get by with in the beginning. I'm going to give it to you straight. Learning Mandarin Chinese is not going to be easy. The US State Department has Chinese in category 5, which is the highest level of difficulty. That's 88 weeks of giving it your all. But why not? You will be the envy of your friends when you're chatting away in Chinese. But look, and this is important, Chinese in itself is not actually a language. Mandarin is a language, but the country of China has way more languages than you can possibly imagine. Chinese languages. And you better make sure you understand this before you go any further.